All right, then I shall start off by saying, okay, we're having an interview with Richard Stanley for the Arkham Reporter channel. First time doing an interview. How are you doing?
Well, very good to be talking to you, sir. I'm doing just fine down here in
That's
the
great.
French Pyrenees.
That's great to hear. Yeah, my first question for you would be the first thing that popped into my mind actually when I was thinking of questions to ask you is that a lot of people who are into Lovecraft know The Color Out of Space off by heart. But you created a film with Nicolas Cage, who is sort of like a normal person's film star. So my question would be, what was the average person, the non-Lovecraft fan, reaction to seeing The Color Out of Space? You know, because they're not familiar with Lovecraft at all. What did they think?
Well, fortunately for us, Colour landed a few weeks before the COVID epidemic really got started. So the Beast did manage to play in cinemas just for a few weeks before he got closed down by the pestilence. So I got an opportunity to actually see the movie in packed auditoriums in Los Angeles and in London, and got a sense of how the audience were taking to it, which was a great pleasure to me. I mean, pretty much everything I do, for me, is I usually make psychedelic movies. I can't really help it, and I try and turn the movie into a sort of an altered state of consciousness, I guess, and drag the audience through it. And as with Hardware and some of the earlier entries, I feel that the audience is always a little bit, yeah, they don't really know how bad it's going to get. I like to start real slow and quiet and to slowly amp up. And usually the way the thing is paced is pretty much the same as if you were dropping a tab of Sunshine LSD or something. It's usually pretty quiet for the first 20 minutes, and people are kind of shuffling from one buttock to another, going, "Is this working or not?" And then it starts to kick in. Then by about halfway, it really locks in, and then I think there's a nice sense of genuine hysteria. A lot of the audience members were pretty freaked out in the second half. They didn't realize it was going to get as bruisingly intense as it does, which pleased me greatly. There's nothing I love more than seeing a whole auditorium jump at the same time. That's always something that just pleases me no end. And there are a couple of teeny little jump scares in there that I think work. So although it's a very, very traditional piece of material, that's part of the challenge. It's the oldest sci-fi horror story you can possibly have, really. Meteorite or comet hits remote farm. Hick farmer, usually wearing plaid and dungarees, comes out and pokes the meteor with a stick. And it's really the same premise we've seen in everything from, I guess, the Blob through to the Stephen King's Creep Show and the Lonesome Death of Geordie Verrill. So stepping back into that territory and trying to rig a few changes on the formula or do something unexpected with it was, a big challenge.
Oh, okay. And I think perhaps one of the other challenges was, of course, putting onto the screen what Lovecraft described as something that could only describe by analogy as color. So in other words, how do you describe on screen color which cannot be described? So you chose magenta, I think was the color in general. What made you choose this color as the color which was undefinable?
Well, magenta is kind of what you get if you cross infrared and ultraviolet. Infrared and ultraviolet exist at the opposite ends of the human visual spectrum. We can't see beyond those colors. So if there is a color that exists, and I'm sure there's multiple colors that exist beyond the human spectrum, we literally don't have. We're incapable of perceiving them. We simply see them as ultraviolet or magenta. It's kind of the closest we can get. So I guess it was pursuing a scientific analogy to what Lovecraft's driving at in the story. A lot of the time, I've tried to back engineer Lovecraft, which is something I've been doing in the other screenplays as well, because Lovecraft's writing in the 1920s. I think color comes from like 1927 or 1928 somewhere. And a lot of the time he's dealing with concepts that haven't been defined yet in the 1920s. But yeah, 100 years later, or close to 100 years later, we've got more science, more vocabulary to actually give form to these inexpressible concepts. An example being Lovecraft talks about non-Euclidean geometry.
Yes, yes.
Which is the term he bandies around. I recall when I was at school in South Africa using this term non-Euclidean geometry in a school in an essay, and it came back with a big red ring around it. And I got marked down, and the teacher pointed out to me that there was no such thing as non-Euclidean geometry, that all geometry was inherently Euclidean. But close to 100 years after Lovecraft, we now find that my primary school teacher was incorrect. That in fact we have fractal geometry, which arises from chaos science. And in fact, there are natural forms of order and natural structures within chaos, which are purely inhuman. Moreover, we actually use fractals now to create the VFX that bring these ideas to life. So in many ways, I think Lovecraft was possibly driving at things that he simply didn't have the language to express. I mean, there was no such concept as fractal geometry in 1928.
Yeah, that's true. He was also always researching a lot. I remember that the Whisperer in Darkness that came about, that inspired just by the discovery of Pluto, which was in, I think, 1933, and then he wrote the story like immediately after, but he called it Yuggoth. So I think he was the type of fellow who was always with his nose in the scientific journals, that type of thing. So
completely, and we also know that in the lead up to writing The Color Out of Space, he was reading about the radium girls. He was interested in the deaths from radium poisoning of the different ladies who'd been painting the fluorescent numbers on the watches.
Yes, yes.
And I think this notion of radiation causing cancer was something that definitely sparked an idea in his head, because on some level in The Color Out of Space, the color's also kind of a metaphor for radiation. The degradation suffered by the Gardner family is certainly in the story mirrors the sort of period concept of radium poisoning.
Yeah, that's actually something I came up with. I did a video recently about how exactly would the great old ones always affect humanity. If you read The Call of Cthulhu, which you obviously have, Cthulhu stirs in Arlia, and then suddenly the sensitive few are being affected. And then I put it down to a type of radiation. And I think that Color Out of Space really lines up with this, wouldn't you say?
Well, I think that the radiation's one level of it, but I'm also very interested in ultrasound and infrasound. Certainly, that's something we delved into with the Colin Stetson's score in particular, which was another good reason to try and watch Color Out of Space in auditoriums, or at least to turn up the volume real loud on one's home sound system, because we kept pushing we kept pushing into illegal areas on the soundtrack and trying to push into outside of the auditory spectrum. And the concept of ultrasound or infrasound or some kind of signal, like everyone right now is extremely worried about 5G and 6G, broadband signals interfering with our heads, or killing bees, or affecting the paths of migratory birds. And I sometimes think that the Call of Cthulhu could be something a bit like 7G broadband, or there's this concept of the morphogenetic field. Professor Sheldrake's idea of the morphogenetic field, which is the holding pattern for biological life forms. The idea being that rather than DNA determining our shape, that we're all tuning into some kind of field which determines what shape we are and what an eyeball looks like. And if you alter the morphogenetic field, spontaneous mutations start to occur across a wide area. The Call of Cthulhu could be something along those lines, a slight little little nudge to the holding pattern of reality, so that everyone starts to have the same dream at the same time, or starts to have the same thought, or starts to spontaneously mutate in the same direction and turn into something new. I think that's what's happening on the Gardner farm in the movie, more or less. It's as if the field of the entire farm has been altered, and it's all starting to turn to something which resembles the alien world that the meteorite came from.
Yeah, that's definitely the way that it came across in the film and the story. It's I mean, Lovecraft called it his favorite story. Is the fact that Lovecraft considered this his best story of himself the reason why he chose to do The Color Out of Space, considering there's so many other tales out there?
Well, to an extent, the story chose me. I didn't really choose it. I think that definitely reassured me, and it was part of the challenge, the fact that Lovecraft rated it so highly amongst his own work. But when the project first began, it largely happened because a venture capitalist, in fact, a guy who ran a concrete company in West Virginia, who was holidaying here in the French Pyrenees, was having a very good day for himself. He just proposed to his girlfriend, and she'd agreed to marry him, and was super happy with things. And he said, "I tell you what, why don't you write a feature-length adaptation of a Lovecraft story, something that you could shoot very easily here in where you live, because the place I live is super creepy." And I thought, great, let's do Dunwich horror. I've always wanted to do the Whately family.
No, I understood that was going to be your second, something that you were talking about. I read in some other interviews that the Dunwich horror was something that also was on your to-do list, basically.
Yeah, I've been wanting to get at the Dunwich horror for a super long time. It's my path's been repeatedly blocked over the years, but I think Wilbur Whately's day will come. It's just because I can't believe that nobody's done the Whately family justice before, and that this notion of a backwards family that's crossbred with ultra-dimensional alien beings is just takes it a step beyond the Texas Chainsaw Family or the Beverly Hillbillies. The Whateleys deserve to have their day on film or on streaming. So I've been chiseling away at trying to get at them for a super long time. But yeah, the guy who was putting up the money for the screenplay was adamant, however, that he wanted us to tackle Color Out of Space. My initial thoughts were exactly that, like, oh shit, the story is so old. Everyone's seen the story a million times. Also, how the hell are we going to do a color that doesn't exist?
Yeah.
And we're shy of a few pence at the time, needed the money. Eventually knuckled down and thought, okay, let's try and do it. We'll attempt to adapt Color Out of Space and see if we can take it on. In its first draft, it was very different from the version that came to screen. Initially tried to set it in the place where I'm living. So it was initially set in France.
Oh, okay. That would have been, I guess. What would you say would the big change be then if it was set in France?
Well, essentially, it changed the nationalities. One of the ideas from the very beginning was that in the 21st century, farming has changed so dramatically that we thought, okay, the Gardner family aren't going to be a traditional dungaree-wearing plaid shirt farming family. Let's go into the modern era and imagine that these are essentially city people who have retired and done what happens all the time out here. They've bought the creepy old farm that none of the locals want to stay in. They have some goofy plan they've been working on all their lives that they want to raise mohair goats and make mohair sweaters, or raise ostriches, or there's always make their own wine. There's always some kind of cherished dream, and in Nathan's case, it's to raise alpacas and make alpaca wool sweaters. And in the initial iteration, I would have imagined that Nathan was probably a retired accountant from the City of London, and that had moved to the south of France to realize their dream. In its first iteration, my ideal choice for Nathan Gardner would have probably been Hugh Grant.
Hugh Grant?
Yeah, I'd love to have
Okay.
seen Hugh Grant mutating, cracking, and losing his fucking shirt under the malign influence of the meteorite. I think would have been super fun. And in the initial drafts, the comedy I think was stronger as well. It was the first draft was funnier because much of it relied on the language barrier problems. In the initial drafts, only the mom, Teresa, was able to fluently speak French. And Amy Pierce, the neighbor, we retained in the first few drafts, and he was only speaking French. So the moment something bad happens to the mom, and spoiler alert, the mom is kind of the first one to go out of the bunch. And the rest are left incapable of communicating the true extent of the problem to the neighbours, because it's the problem if you're speaking Franglais is you can say bonjour, ça va bien, how you doing, nice day, but to try and explain that your wife is mutating because of some kind of ultra dimensional influence from an alien meteorite, it's too much.
Yeah, not something they really teach you in Duolingo or some language app, right?
But then by the time we'd finished writing the draft, the person who'd commissioned it had lost all their money and was in rehab and couldn't pay for it anymore. The movie didn't get instantly set up. Instead, the script floated around for a bunch of years. I tried setting it up in Canada, pitched it at the Frontier Film Market, and rewrote the script. France has very little interest in sci-fi horror movies. For some reason, France has almost never made a sci-fi horror movie. When they make science fiction, they tend to go all Valerian and the City of Wonders. And when they do horror, they kind of go martyrs and high tension and heavy duty violence. The classic sort of alien thing blend of sci-fi horror is something that seems alien to Gallic sensibilities. At least we couldn't get any company to jump on it. So I tried to set it up as a Canadian movie, shifted the Gardner family to Quebec, attempted to keep the francophone jokes in the movie, made the Gardner family into New Yorkers in this draft, and settling in Quebec, and kept Teresa as having Quebecois blood, and they've taken the old farm and they're trying to make a go of it. When we couldn't get backing out of Canada, it became logical just to move it back to Arkham County. It's only a little bit further south from Quebec. And finally, the thing settled down into the Gardeners being New Yorkers and moving upstate to Arkham County. And it kind of took on the form it's in now.
I definitely appreciated that little sort of Easter egg there. I think it was one of the lead character had an Arkham shirt or something. And then in one scene, I remember he was reading The Willows casually, and it was sort of a small little touch, but I think a lot of Lovecraft fans would have picked up on that.
Well, Lovecraft did say The Willows was the scariest story he'd ever read.
I figured that's why you chose to put that in there.
Yeah, H.P. Lovecraft's pick of the scariest story ever.
Yeah.
So it was a tiny little Easter egg and a recommendation and a way of encouraging more people to read The Willows, I guess.
Yeah.
But Ward, the surrogate for Lovecraft in the movie, who gets to narrate the movie, is obviously a Miskatonic University graduate.
Right.
I think that's name checked somewhere, but we can tell from his sweater and a couple of other details that he's he's a Miskatonic U alumni. We didn't have.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that it really shows that you are not just a filmmaker in there to cash in the name, which is something that happens sadly in the Lovecraft world, especially in gaming. They just stick on some tentacles, things like this, call it Lovecraft, and that's it. But the fact that you have so many little Easter eggs and nods to fans in there, it really shows your admiration for Lovecraft.
Well, I'm serious about it. I do want to proceed with the program. I mean, all those things are Easter eggs, but they're also indicators of a wider universe.
Yes.
Sadly, we did not have the budget to go into Arkham. or to actually go on campus at Miskatonic U. I'm desperate to go back on campus after all these years. I would love to show what I think Miskatonic University would be like in 2022. Certainly something I hope to lead up to. And I'd certainly like to get access to the restricted documents department, and eventually get to the Necronomicon.
Of course, yeah. One of the big things is this whole thing with Guillermo del Toro. His attempts to adapt At the Mountains of Madness. Surely you've heard about this, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah, and that is just, it fell flat over and over again. He couldn't get the funding. It was in development hell, all these sorts of things. So my question about this, since you are have a great knowledge of Hollywood and all this, do you think that, frankly, a studio would be willing to put down like 150 million on a Lovecraft story? Honestly,
no.
that's what I feared.
They're but they'd be good and they'd be bad, as the pirates say. The problem is that Lovecraft is public domain. The studio cannot own and control the IP.
Right.
And I think that it's difficult to get a major, be it Netflix or anyone else, to drop that amount of money on something they can't own. They want to completely own it, lock, stock, and barrel. And if they could completely own Cthulhu and own the Necronomicon and TM it and have and hold it, then they would drop 150 million on it, sure. But dropping that amount of money and knowing that the Asylum or anyone else could make 5 movies with the same title in the time it takes them to actually put it through production, I think is something that causes it to stick in their throats. By the same token, it's also a good thing, because it means that Cthulhu and the Necronomicon and the old ones can't be owned by some kind of corporate monster. It keeps them free, and it means that anyone is entitled to have a bash at them, to try and adapt them. Of course, private individuals and the few independent production companies still surviving out there have no real hope of adapting a story set in Antarctica or set at the bottom of the Mariana Trench or set on Pluto. So they're difficult to get at, like the H.G. Wells canon. But they're all in public domain. Anyone who wants to try is welcome.
It's a bit of a double-edged sword there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. There's good and there's bad to it. I think it's good that that they can't be controlled. And one of the weirdest things about the whole Cthulhu mythos and the whole way it's worked so far is that it's not owned by any corporate power, and it's not deliberately pushed by Lucasfilm or by Walt Disney or anyone else. Yet it's almost saturated the whole of the planet Earth. Children here in the French Pyrenees and back in South Africa recognize my fridge magnets and go Cthulhu, and automatically know what these things are. Name recognition of the Necronomicon and some of the Lovecraftiana is pretty much global. People know about this stuff in Russia. They know about it in Japan. They know about it in Africa. Yet no corporate power has done that deliberately. There's been no marketing department behind it. It hasn't been deliberately plugged by Disney or deliberately sold to us. It's spread virally over the years and through through individual passion, different cottage industries, and it's got a remarkable depth and range for something which has literally never been deliberately promoted by any corporate power.
Yeah, that's very true. I've done a few videos where I looked at, for example, I'm really into metal music, so I looked at metal bands who were inspired by Lovecraft and the range of places that I found of musicians making music in the sort of Lovecraftian style. I found people in Syria, for example, making a metal band in Syria singing about Lovecraft. But if Lovecraft is kind of funny in that he's known around the world, but not widely. So he's not like Spider-Man or something like this. Every Joe Normie on the streets is going to know that. But so perhaps this would also be a hindrance to the success of a potential Hollywood film. like a blockbuster or something. In that a lot of people around the world would be like, yeah, great, let's go watch. But I don't think it would be enough numbers to regenerate the profits of 150 million or something, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly beyond my wildest estimations.
Yeah.
I mean, at the moment, I guess I'm thinking that tops you can probably recoup still at around 6 or 7, given the current spread of the mythos.
Yeah.
Um, we're all debating whether you could go as high as 10. But 150 million, yeah,
Pushing the luck.
that's far beyond any of the math that we've been able to run on this thing so far. I mean, as you mentioned, Spider-Man. It's worth noting that Lovecraft himself, when he created the mythos, I think was super ahead of the game, because he really encouraged the idea of creating a shared universe.
Yeah.
He deliberately encouraged other authors to use his concepts and to use his ideas. And Lovecraft himself was very opposed, I think, to the idea of copyrighting or owning any of these concepts. And
Yeah, he loathed it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
he deliberately wanted to spread it as a kind of an enlarged universe, and encouraged other people to add their own occult volumes to the bookshelf of fictional user manuals, and to make up their own gods and deities, and to keep extrapolating on the pantheon. So in a way, it's he was ahead of his time with the idea of a series of interlinked stories in a shared universe. And I'm still ahead of our time, ahead of the studios, because Marvel and the studios love the idea of a Marvel-verse, or a universal monster-verse. But the idea of a public domain universe where the entire audience is entitled to contribute and continue
No.
to extrapolate on it, it's something entirely new. It's something that the corporate powers can't wrap their heads around. But that's no discouragement to Cthulhu. Cthulhu is not slowing down, and is continuing to. Cthulhu's tendrils continue to spread, whether there's any corporate backing behind it or not.
That's definitely one of the benefits. His openness, and the fact that he's in the open market. Basically, anyone can add. So that definitely, I think, motivates a lot of people to write their own stories and such. Do you actually write any short stories?
Yeah, I do, and
Yeah.
I attempt to write novels, but some macabre curse. I don't know what it is. The equivalent of Dr. Seuss's thing, the key slapping slipard that knocks the key out of the lock every time
Yeah.
you put it in, means that I've singularly failed to ever publish anything.
Oh,
It's
okay.
super bizarre. When it gets right down to it, folk always want movie-related stuff. When you come in with something which is completely non-related, which is poetry or a Lovecraftian ghost story, I've been having a very hard time placing the fiction. But there's several manuscripts which live in Samizdat, which I hope will eventually find their way into publication, into the public eye.
Well, that would be great. They are in cosmic horror type stories, or homages, pastiches, or completely original.
Yeah, all over the scale. But the thing I'm trying to do is I guess find a fusion between cosmic horror, supernatural horror, and I guess documentation. The best stuff is a kind of true, but at the same time extrapolated into territory that's yes, super frightening. So yeah, at the moment I've been trying to write about the history of the region I'm living in.
Okay. And how did Lovecraftian horror? You got into that at a very early age, from my understanding. Your mother was reading to you.
Yeah, it was my mum's fault. My mum read me Dream Quest for Unknown Kadath when I was very, very young. And certainly the Lovecraft Dunsanian fantasies, which he wrote when he was young, are a very good gateway drug to the material. kind of the thin end of the wedge. So I think I probably got Dream Quest when I was about 5 or 6. And then by the time I was 12 or 13, I'd discovered the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game and had become a classic H.P. Lovecraft nerd and knew all the lore and the names of the different deities and things. And it kind of kicked in early. And I guess my mum trained me to adapt H.P. Lovecraft's stories into movies in kind of the same way that Sarah Connor teaches her kid how to fight cyborgs. It was just something that I started thinking about from very young, and my first rough attempt at a color out of space script is probably from when I was 13. I initially imagined it was something that you could shoot in the Hex River Valley or in the Western Cape somewhere back in South Africa.
Yeah. We're both from South Africa, but I also got into Lovecraft when I was still down there. But it was only because I read this non-Lovecraftian horror book, and they just used the name Yog-Sothoth, and I thought it was so weird. But actually, now that I'm reflecting, I don't recall seeing many Lovecraft books when I was living down there. Maybe, did you find? Is there actually a presence with Lovecraft in South Africa, or not really? I'm not sure.
Not really. I owe everything to my mother and to Mr. Hogan from the Bookworm, which was the second-hand bookshop in Fish Hoek, South Africa. Mr. Hogan, God bless his socks, recognized our taste and knew to save aside paperbacks when they came in that were related to this material. So I got to read most of the Lovecraft material, and Mr. Hogan saved aside Clark Ashton Smith's and Robert E. Howard, and kept a little stockpile. So over the course of 10 years or so, I was able to catch up with most of the principal stories. In truth, there's not a lot of Lovecraft. I mean, he wrote a limited amount in his life, and didn't live long enough, and wasted too much time on his correspondence and revising other people's stories, and not spending enough time writing his own material. And strongly advise anyone who doesn't have it already to acquire the full works of H.P. Lovecraft. It doesn't take up a lot of space on your shelf, and it's I think cornerstone stuff.
Absolutely, and there's a benefit with him being in the copyright free zone. There's so many publishers, you can pick them up cheap. I always tell the audience, just go get one. It's so cheap to pick one up.
Yeah, I just no collections complete without it. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe need to be there. You seem to be on the
Lovecraft film sort of thing, but as you said, he didn't do a lot of stories. Would you consider something from Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith? They have a lot more extensive catalog to work with.
Well, actually, this started with Smith because my trajectory into the pretty insane circumstances I now find myself in began with a decision to make a short movie. I hadn't made a movie in ages, and we were sitting out here in the mountains, and we thought, damn, we should just shoot something. And we decided to do a short based on The Mother of Toads by Clark Ashton Smith, which is a very short story by Smith. And in the course of doing an adaptation of Mother of Toads, we realized that Clark Ashton Smith was in public domain. We checked the underlying rights, like, can we do this? And oh gee, we can. Then the thought occurred, hang on, if Smith is in public domain, what about Lovecraft? That then led to going after Color Out of Space. And by the same thinking, all of us secretly, deep down in our souls, are really doubting Netflix's exclusivity to the Conan IP. How did Conan end up being owned by these folk? And how the heck did that happen? Because we all know how Robert E. Howard died, and we also know that he didn't leave a will that secured the underlying rights to Conan, Solomon Kane, Bran McMahon, and all those other great characters. But for some reason, Howard's material is still considered to be in copyright. It's all heavily controlled by the Marvelverse and by a whole bunch of different people, and you can't go near it. I can't touch Tulsa Doom. I can't touch Cull or Volusia or any of that stuff, which is irritating. And amazingly, nor can Arnie Schwarzenegger, nor can John Milius, nor can a number of people who would have loved to have done more material, but all of the rights are controlled so rigorously that we can't get near Robert E. Howard. But anything by Clark Ashton Smith or H.P. Lovecraft is fair game. The only thing which I guess makes Smith more difficult is that fewer people are actually aware of his material. It hasn't reached the same level of saturation. It's harder to read for most folk, and also Smith's stuff is so delirious, as Lovecraft said, for sheer demoniac strangeness. Go thou to Smith. But a story like Empire of the Necromancers would, of course, be tremendous on screen. But wow, to have the budget or the ability to realize such alien worlds and alien vistas and such, apocalyptic scale, I think a lot of it would make for great animation. There's huge VFX animation potential in some of Smith's material, because there's certainly voyages into realms of existence and being which are utterly alien to our own. But trying to realize it on the budget, super tricky. With the Lovecraft material, I'm drawn back again and again to the Arkham backwoods, because I know I can't get to Yuggoth very easily. I know they won't let me shoot in Antarctica. Trying to make it to the bottom of the ocean is hard. The Arkham backwoods, however, is still somewhere we can go to. And there's material like Dunwich Horror, Whisperer in Darkness, even Haunter of the Dark. Someone should really have a go at Shadow Out of Time. The Thing on the Doorstep. There's a lot of material which I think is accessible on a budget.
Yeah, some of your stories really with the budget would be too much, but some of the others are very doable, I think. I guess there's not much hope for a Shadow of an Innsmouth story. That might be a bit more budget demanding. I love that story. Just any chance you would make that. I know we have the lottery this week. It's like 88 million or something. So if I win, I'll send you a check and you make a Shadow of an Innsmouth for me.
If you insist, I'd still rather do Dunwich, though.
All right, fair, sir.
I've been driving at the Whately family so long, and I've got a single-minded desire to try and get myself into that restricted document section of the Miskatonic U Library and try to get it page 751 in the Necronomicon, which seems like a small goal, but maybe one day I'll do it. Shadow over Innsmouth, the best we got is Stuart Gordon's Dagon.
Yeah.
Which is patchy, but that's all there is so far. I'm actually an extra in Dagon. I'm lurking around in the background, recognizable by my hat. Yeah, I was there when they were shooting it. It was shot just across the border from where I'm living in Spain. Most of Dagon was shot in Galicia. It's produce locale. It was super cheap, pure chaos. And I think Stuart Gordon kept me around just because I spoke English and they could kick back and talk about Lovecraft at mealtimes. And so I guess my close exposure to the previous attempt to shoot Shadow over Innsmouth would make me hesitate before going back into those dark waters.
I have to rewatch it. I watched it recently to do a review for my channel, but now I have to modify the script. I didn't know you were in there as an
Yeah,
extra.
just lurking in the background, but
Okay.
very identifiable by the hat.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the pictures when I was doing for my newsletter videos. You really love this hat, I think. It must be very sentimental to you.
Yeah, kind of. It was fallout from Hardware around
Oh,
about
okay.
that time. Yeah, the first editor on Hardware died abruptly. Richard Bedford, who was the editor of Absolute Beginners, the Julian Temple movie, and a bunch of things. He was the industry old-timer who came onto Hardware and then fucking died on us about 2 weeks into the edit. I remember coming into the edit suite and seeing Richard's hat sitting on the Steenbeck, getting the news, and then a decision was made to wear Richard's hat through the rest of the shoot so that he could live on somehow. And then the thought occurred to me that after the Hardware press, that more folk recognized me by the hat than by the name or the face.
Oh, okay.
So I thought, okay, I better keep this shit because I can see that even if I'm in silhouette or if I'm someone else in silhouette and I've got the hat, people automatically identify. And I started to notice, and it holds true today, like if I'm going to Comic-Con or one of these different big fan fests, if I'm sitting down and I put on the hat, suddenly a small queue of people starts to form to get autographs. If I want to get up and go and browse a few stalls and buy some old Warren comics or something without anyone asking any questions, I just put the hat onto the table and wander on down, and no one recognizes me. So it's been super handy that way around. And I find that if you're set in one continuous style of clothing, it means that you're just invisible if you suddenly change.
Yeah, it's like when you see your teacher outside of class. It's just the context is just so weird, right?
Yeah,
Doesn't look right.
Yeah, if I was wearing like a hot pink tracksuit or something, and hair tied back in a tail, I could jog right into a production company that I was working in and deliver a package or pick something up, and they wouldn't even recognize me.
Mm-hmm. Any plans to go to the Necronomicon in Providence this year?
Not this year.
No? Have you been before though?
Yeah, I have, but generally, I don't like to go anywhere unless I've got produce. I don't like to go to market without something to show or sell.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just crawling out of the COVID apocalypse.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't have a killer Lovecraft movie which is ready to land just yet.
Not yet, but sure it's coming.
Well, there's certainly clouds brooding over us. That's for sure. I mean, we've got a ways to go until Cthulhu can probably fully have its day.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's always been my feeling that you've got to bring the old ones on in a certain order. For me, I want Yog-Sothoth does have to be placated.
Of course, yes.
Lovecraft insists that you always placate Yog-Sothoth first. Yog-Sothoth is the key in the gate and the guardian of the way. So we really need a manifestation of Yog-Sothoth in order to open the path for Shub-Niggurath and Azathoth and Nyarlathotep. Why is there not a screen Nyarlathotep yet? We really need one. And of course, Cthulhu itself, I'm not sure what gender to assign to Cthulhu.
Well, yeah, especially these days, that could be a spicy question.
Why?
You've seen the adaptation of Call of Cthulhu by the H.P. Lovecraft Society.
Yeah, I have. I mean,
any thoughts on that one?
Well, like all of the H.P. Lovecraft Society work, it's fun, and it reminds me of what would have happened if it had been adapted by Guy Madden. I enjoy the silent movie style, but I don't think it does Lovecraft justice, which is cruel, but Cthulhu really needs to be given his due. Its due. There I go, assigning gender to the thing again when I really shouldn't. The old ones do need to be terrifying beyond belief, and to literally turn the audience's hair white, and need to be given their godlike stature. Lovecraft's themes of cosmic dread need to be made relevant and connected to the hearts of the audience, so that people can feel that sense of impending doom for themselves. I don't really get that from the Lovecraft Society work, which is fun, and it's a curiosity. I think it's fun if you've already read the stories.
Yes.
But if you're coming to it fresh, it might puzzle people as to what on earth is the fuss about, is the set. But yeah, I'm completely in favor of updating and adapting Lovecraft. Simply, I'm mostly doing that myself just because I want kids and I want people in the next generation to fear the old ones, to make those ideas land again. So I'm constantly asking myself, how does this connect? And in the period we're in now, with between COVID and the environment of planet Earth seemingly turning on humankind, I think there's tremendous scope for re-examining those themes. I mean, it comes back to those ideas about fractal geometry and the multi-dimensional nature of reality. There's things in the Lovecraft material which I think are still shockingly relevant.
Yes, for sure. And it would have been it would be really interesting to see how you would adapt the damage horror, like the Whatley brothers, basically, especially the second more hideous brother. I suppose you would need quite a few million just for rendering that graphic. Or
yeah, it's a toughie.
How would you? Okay, I know in the story for the majority, the brother, the more hideous brother is invisible, but at the time he becomes visible. It becomes visible. How would you have presented that on screen, actually?
Well, it's the powder, isn't it? The powder of Ibn Ghazni that makes it briefly visible. So it's kind of something that you would probably sense the outlines of if it was moving in the rain, or a bit like your Invisible Man, you'd be able to earlier on sense outlines of it. But yeah, when you blow the powder, the three-dimensional outline of the thing and some of the parts of the powder settle on become visible. So it would still be partly invisible. Of course, you need an awful lot of the powder at the end for the thing to become fully manifest. And we do want to see it right at the tippy tip. The way the story presents it, I think, is very much in keeping with your normal horror movie structure, that you don't see the monster, and then you can hardly see the monster, and you see a little glimpse of it here, and then of course finally at the very end when it confronts Armitage, Rice, and Morgan, we finally see Wilbur's brother, and we see the hideous family resemblance. So we would have to, and of course we would be really cheating if we did not show that. I'm a firm believer in eventually showing the monster and bringing it on, which would need quite a few million. And moreover, it's not just Wilbur's brother, because Wilbur's brother, of course, then it opens the gate for Yog Sothoth. There's a full manifestation of Yog, of this ultra-dimensional alien deity at the end of Dunwich, and the whole story is kind of a blasphemous parody retelling of the Christ story. Anyway, I mean, Wilbur Whateley's sort of the Lovecraftian Antichrist. Is the inconceivable, these formless forces of chaos incarnated to its flesh, into human form, and at the end, of course, like Christ on the cross, he cries out to his father, "Father, Father, Yog-Sothoth," which is very much the rapture of Wilbur Whateley, and that's something that has to be portrayed, just like we all want to see Lavinia with the two twins, with our Lovecraftian Virgin Mary, and so along with the Necronomicon, the book, which gives the mythos a lot of its crazy iconography, and I think those iconic moments need to be addressed on screen and presented to as wide an audience as possible. So it's something that I'm striving towards. I'm shocked at the failures of the previous adaptations to go there, and the fact that folk haven't been able to invest those moments with the passion that they deserve.
Yeah. I know they made some adaptation of it in 1970 or something, but it's best forgotten, perhaps.
Yeah, well, it just kind of whinges out on all the big issues. Wilbur Whateley's kind of human, and he's trying to sacrifice some girl, and it just muffs the entire main arc of the piece, and Danton can't show us any of that stuff. And even now, it's just at the outer edge of possibility. We're only just getting the technology and the access to the technology to have any hope of portraying the stuff.
Well, anyway, I guess before we, I've already taken so much of your time, it's almost an hour. Before we end, is there any future works you'd like to promote, Lovecraftian or not? Something people who follow you can be on the lookout for?
Well, at the moment, definitely going full bore after Lovecraft and after the Whateleys or the Whateleys, depending on the pronunciation. But I'm also working out of my home in Occitania in the French Pyrenees, which has some very strange supernatural and spiritual traditions of its own, and I've been delving into that material for a while, and as a result, my recent life here has taken on the quality of a supernatural horror novel running tragicomic apocalyptic nightmare. So I've been blogging about it, and we've been shooting as well. We've been shooting a lot of material in the course of the last 12 months, and hope to have a feature-length real-life documentary on what's been taking place down here, ready by the end of the year. It's kind of a real-life sequel to a film we made called The Other World a few years ago, back in 2012, which is also shot down here. But since the shooting of The Other World, most of the participants in The Other World have either died or betrayed each other or been killed in different ways. So the follow-up will pick up the story. So the moment, I'm busy blogging like crazy about what's happening down here. And hope to have a feature-length documentary on the subject landing towards the end of the year. I'm also screwing around with trying to get funding for a short movie. I'd love to do an Ambrose Bierce adaptation, just to ruin the curve.
Okay, that would be very good. It's also a name that sort of goes hand in hand with people who also love Lovecraft.
Well, not enough Bierce out there, so I thought Ambrose Bierce deserves a little love.
Oh, best of luck to you then for this one then. Anyway, I think I've taken enough of your time. I really appreciate, I'm a small channel, but nonetheless I take great pride in having you on my channel, and thank you very much for spending some time chatting about Lovecraft with me.
It's been a pleasure, sir. Hopefully we'll do this again sometime.
I hope so too. All right, best of luck.
Good stuff. Yay, Zulu, really vertagen.
Yeah, vertagen.
Yay.